Yo, what's good, ladies and gentlemen? Hope you all are doing well here on this Thursday night. And I got a special guest on with me tonight. Kenny, what's going on, man?
How's it going? Glad to be back.
So, in today's video on Two Mics All Sports, we're going to give you guys our thoughts about the NBA as tonight are like the final three games of the game of the season before the All-Star break, and most teams we've figured out their positioning on how they've at least played during the first half of the season. So we're basically just going to get into every team and talk about how they've been performing as a whole and what teams I think are really standing out to us. But as we get started, Kenny, there's a team that you mentioned to me just before we started recording that you've been really hind in on and has fascinated you.
Yeah, I really like San Antonio this year. I think they're a good unit. Obviously led by Victor Wembanyama. Um, One thing that gets me is everyone talks about how much of a powerhouse, OKC is, and it's the truth. They're a powerhouse. They're reigning champs, but all year San Antonio's had their number, and they're right behind them in the standings. I think Wemby's a sensational talent, and I think they're a good young core, and they have a chance to go far if they can stay healthy.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I think it's the sense where it's like last year. I think with the Thunder, they were just such a juggernaut, but the Spurs have had their number this year. Like time and time again, they've been able to find the Thunder's weaknesses. And when Benyama's playing winning basketball, then he also has a supporting cast. We knew this for a while. Once they got the right players around Wembanyama, the Spurs were going to be competitive. And now that they've done that, the Spurs are one of the best teams in the league. Perfect example. Wemby had 26 points in 8 minutes a few nights ago against the Lakers. Obviously, I don't think the Lakers were playing Luka, LeBron, but just in today's NBA, to do that in 8 minutes is absolutely insane. Like we haven't
Yeah,
seen like a scoring like that since like probably Tracy McGrady did it with the Rockets in 12 seconds. But it's like the Spurs, they're good on both sides of the ball. And I like their. I can't think of the head coach on the top of my head, but now this guy's implemented a new system ever since Pop retired, and I like the way he's coaching things. Stephon Castle has completely elevated his game this year. He's close to averaging 19 points a game. Then you got the Aaron Fox, who's a mainstay, and when you get him on a competitive team, he only elevates his game more. I love this. I love the signing when they brought Luke Cornett in free agency, and then as time's gone on, Dylan Harper's coming to his own, and they're playing so well that Jeremy Shohan, who is one of their better players, they just let him go. So obviously their team is as a collective unit. And just talking about the Spurs and the West as a whole, it's going to be tough, I think, for the Thunder to get back to the finals because I really like the Nuggets and I really like the Spurs against the Thunder in a 7 game series. If that's in the second round, if that's in the conference finals, it remains to be seen. But I definitely think the Thunder's road to back to back is not going to be easy this year.
definitely not. I like what you say about Stephon Castle. I mean, he's a guy, if I'm not mistaken, won the Rookie of the Year, and then at the end of the day, their scouting and their capability to draft players has been showing off a lot recently. Like you said, Dylan Harper, Stephon Castle, even Wembanyama. Wembanyama was more of a set in stone pick. If anyone had that pick, they were taking him. But it's still impressive. I mean, they do what they do, and they're a good team, one to watch for sure. I think they're going to go far.
Yeah, for sure. And it's like Castle already. I think it's good that they brought in a guy like Castle because he was already used to playing winning basketball with a big man and Donovan Clingan back in UConn. So to have that experience coming into the NBA, I think has been huge. And it's just they're a young team, so even if they don't do much in the playoffs this year, they're going to be back the next year doing it again, and they're only going to find ways to get better. So I think that's the most interesting thing about it. They're as a collective unit, they're playing very well. They're one of the best defensive teams in the league. Big thanks to Wembanyama, but still, I think a lot of people question the multitude of guards that they had because they obviously did not expect to get Dylan Harper. They did not expect to get the second pick. That's why they traded for De'Aaron Fox when they did. But at the same time, they've been finding ways to implement this kind of stuff in and out, and that's what's been leading to them winning basketball games. So
Yeah, for sure.
but a team that I want to talk about, I've been harping them. If anyone's been listening to me, I was on the radio earlier today and I was talking about the Charlotte Hornets. I like them really much right now. I like them a lot right now. Although they're not in the top six or even the top eight, they're that team right now that I would not want to play in a first round series. LaMelo Ball playing well, but also staying healthy. Brandon Miller staying healthy, playing well. And Con Knipple is about to shatter the 3-point record for rookies. He's been absolutely insane. He's right there behind Cooper Flag when it comes to Rookie of the Year, in my opinion. And then they have supporting cast members around them. Their starting lineup, the one they're running right now, I think before the loss of the Pistons, was 11-1 in their last 12 or 13 games played. They've been one of the hottest teams all year, and and they're easily, I think, the best team in the play-in. And if we saw anything from last night, a Pistons Hornets first round matchup is going to be a physical series because those teams
Yeah,
obviously have some type of beef built up for some reason. But I think that would be an interesting first round series because, and I think it's huge for LaMelo Ball because the thing that's been pictured around him is, oh, he can play well, but in losing situations and losing basketball. They're winning games right now, and it's because of him. It's yes because of the supporting cast, but LaMelo is a big cause of that, and I don't think people were able to understand that when they weren't winning games. But now that they are, I think it's something that easily should be focused on because he's a great player, and just getting the right supporting cast around him obviously has played huge dividends.
yeah. Lamelo has always been a hooper, in my opinion. Um, One thing I want to touch on is that fight. Dude, that was crazy. I mean, that was insane. But nah, the Hornets are good. I kind of realized that when they beat the Sixers by like 50 points. I think it was like last week. That was horrible. I mean, there was no Paul George, no Embiid in that game, but dude, it was rough. But Con Knipple, like you said, he's a sensational rookie. He's a beast. And then Lamelo, like I said, he's always been a hooper. You got Brandon Miller. You got Miles Bridges. I mean, they're a good squad. They're young too. Like them a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the addition of Kobe White, I think, will be huge for their bench. I think he'll be the perfect six man for them. And it's like at the end of the day, it's like you look at this team and stuff like that. And then also, I just want to go back to the Pistons things real quick. Isaiah Stewart wasn't even on the court, but he got suspended the most games just because he wanted to get into the fight. He's that type of guy. He doesn't get paid the money because of his stats. He gets paid the money because of the physicality he brings to the game. He
Yeah,
he was he got in there with I think it was Miles Bridges and was just fighting him and then got suspended 7 games. So, but then transitioning to the team that they played, the Pistons too. Like obviously they were good last year, but they've just emerged it even more this year. Cade Cunningham has been that MVP level guy for them. They're 40-13. When's the last time we've seen the Pistons this good? Obviously they were good last year and took the Knicks to the limit. But this year they can completely elevate it. Jalen Duren has been a beast. Cade Cunningham has been that guy. Thompson, I think it's Sar Thompson has been that defensive guy that they know they wanted him to be. And then they have other supporting cast guys that have been balling out. And then they were able, and then Jaden Ivey, a guy that didn't work out. They got him out of the building for pieces they needed now. And it seems it to be working. The Pistons as a cohesive unit are a great team offensively and defensively. And JB Bickerstaff, who had success in Cleveland, got fired, and then is doing it again in Detroit, I think is huge. And honestly, they could be the favorite, I think, in the Eastern Conference, just the way they're playing collectively. And they're a defensive team, but also can score 135, 140 points on you.
yeah, for sure. I like the Pistons. I don't think they're gonna come out of the East. I mean, the way they're playing in the regular season is obviously great, but when you get that far, that's where experience kicks in, and I feel like the Eastern Conference is kind of full of experience, dude. They're they're a good squad, but if they can perform in the playoffs, they can really prove me wrong. I'm not a sole believer yet, but I do love their squad. I really do. And it's crazy because not last year, but a few years back, dude, they were sitting at the bottom of the East for a good amount of time. And you have a blink in a blink of an eye, like you look and here they are. I think they've been sitting atop of the hill in the East this season, probably all year. Because they got off to a great start this year, and then it's like they haven't looked back, which is crazy. Because usually you see these teams run out of gas, stop clicking, and not with them.
Yeah, no, I think it's just been the point where it's like they haven't had any they when their injuries happen, other guys have been able to step up, and you see that a lot in the regular season, like when the bench, like when there's not much pressure on you, like these bench guys really step up and emerge in roles and stuff like that. And that's what they signed a guy like Duncan Robinson for. That's what they traded for Kevin Herter. Like these 3-and-D guys are going to be huge for the playoffs if they can stay consistent, because if we learned anything from last year with the Thunder, you have a good starting lineup and then you have a decent bench, it's going to take you far, and that's exactly what I did for the Thunder. So, but I think it's in the sense where I think the Pistons, like I said, could come out of these. I didn't know you disagree with that. Let me ask you this then: what team right now are you liking out of the East that could be a lock, or not a lock, but a team that you could easily see in the conference finals if it isn't the Pistons?
Well, you got to keep an eye on Cleveland. Um, we'll touch on that here shortly, and then the way Boston's been playing, even without Tatum, is so impressive to me. Like, I just I was thinking maybe they'd be sitting around, seventh in the East this year, but dude, they're performing. They're showing that they're a good squad. They're coached well. Missoula is obviously a great coach. He doesn't show much emotion, but the guy can coach. I mean, there's no arguing that. And then I want to say my Sixers, but I'll leave it. I'll leave it at Cleveland and Boston.
Yeah, I think Cleveland is definitely like an interesting one because obviously they made the big acquisition to acquire James Harden and they swapped him for Darius Garland. So obviously that's in the direction that you want to win now. And then obviously they were able to get some good guys and Dennis Schroeder and Keon Ellis for DeAndre Hunter. So they have good depth and they have a good starting lineup. But here's the thing: you mesh Cleveland six failures with James Harden. I don't know if that's a recipe for success. I think they could make the conference finals. It just it seems like Donovan Mitchell, he's a great performer, one of the best guys I've seen, but he always usually comes up short sometimes in the playoffs. James Harden, known for coming up short in the playoffs, and then Jared Allen and Evan Mobley. Although Mobley has been good at times, he's come up short in the playoffs or not been healthy. So you got the issue of injuries out of the building with Darius Garland, so, and accepting the fact that you want to win now, at least in this year or the next year. But say you don't win that, where do you go from there? Because they've had this core for a little while now. They got rid of the first piece. I think the next piece would easily have to be Evan Mobley. But with this whole Celtics thing, I think it's interesting in the sense where it's like they've been playing well. Jaylen Brown has been playing at an MVP level. And then I don't know if you heard, Jason Tatum is back to practicing again. So they could possibly have him for the playoffs. I don't know how much impact he's going to make not playing all year. But if they can continue playing, and they were able to acquire Nikola Vucevic, the one need they had at center, so they have a good enough starting lineup. And if we learned anything from Boston, don't count them out in the playoff series. They're great defensively. They know how to play winning basketball, and they find these diamond in the rough guys. So when their guys go down, they're immediately ready to step up. And they won the championship not too long 2 years ago, so they could be right back in the conference finals, maybe even the finals if they aren't taken with enough consideration. I think.
I've always been a fan of Vucevic. I think he's a great player. Guy can score. He can shoot. Obviously, he can play defense. Um, I feel like Anthony Simons was a great piece for the Celtics, though, and I mean, obviously, when you get a guy like Vucevic, it comes at a cost. So we'll see how that pays off. I mean, I feel like they've had good trade history recently, so this is going to be one to watch for sure. But that was news to me that Tatum's back at practice. I didn't hear that, so that's another reason to keep an eye out on them. Um, I like I said, I feel like coaching and experience pays off, and Celtics are a team that has both. So definitely keep an eye out.
Yeah, and I think a great example of this Boston team, I think, is the 2019 Toronto squad because they were good. They were getting carried by Kawhi Leonard, and then they made that trade for Marcus Gasol at the trade deadline, and that's exactly all they needed. Jaylen Brown, I think, could have the cap. We saw it a few years ago. He won the conference finals MVP, and then he won the finals MVP. If he's shooting the ball well and playing at a consistent basis, it's going to be tough for teams to stop them. And I think the acquisition of Vucevic, Derek White, has always been good ever since he's got to Boston. Peyton Pritchard, he can pull up from anywhere at this point and drain it. And then if you have other guys in there, the Celtics at the end of the day, they don't have to have a deep roster. They just have to have the right guy step up at the right time and they'll have success. We've seen it time and time again. I like you bring up the point. They're usually on the right side of trades, and I think it's very likely this could happen too because although Anthony Simons has been good, you have Peyton Pritchard and you have Derek White who've been mainstays. Get a guy in Vucevic and solidify an issue that you need to have and would be, I think, a massive issue in the playoffs if they didn't fortify. And we saw it last year. Lakers traded for Luka Doncic, had a great squad, did not have a starting center, and that's why they got eliminated in the first round of the playoffs. Filling issues the best you can is better than not filling them at all, and I think the Celtics doing that will give them a better chance in the playoffs than a few weeks ago.
Yeah, I think I think the number one position that's important in basketball is the five. You need a guy in there to, take up space on the other end. And the center can literally draw up any play, whether it's a pick or whether it's getting down into the paint. The center is very important, and we kind of see that a lot being Sixers fans because obviously, as you know, he's not very reliable. He doesn't play often. He doesn't play on back to backs. So when you have a guy like Andre Drummond, Adembona out there, Adembona can arguably be a four, and he's not the biggest guy. And then Andre, he's a hooper, but he's very slow. He's older in age. It just we just feel like much of a slower team when especially Andre's on the court, but even when Adem's on the court, it just feels like we have no size, we have no defense, and that's the reason we're getting beat by 30 plus points at least once every 2 weeks. So
No, yeah, it's like I like a Dembona just reminds me another version of Paul Reed at this point. It's like he's
he's a
this.
bit better than Paul, but yeah,
Yeah, he is. Oh, he's. I think he's 10 times better than Paul. But I think, like you said, like although he might be good when it comes to the build and the physicality he can bring to the table, although he might have it in his mindset, he can't do much when these bigger guys are backing him down in the paint and scoring easily. And that brings me to a guy that does that, but then also can get back down very easily. And Karl Anthony Towns in the New York Knicks. Let me ask you this: how do you feel about them? Obviously, they're third in the East. They've had success the past few years, but their kryptonite, the Indiana Pacers, are not going to make the playoffs this year. And obviously, they've had good stretches. They've had some terrible stretches. Where do you see them going? Because I think the addition of Jose Alvarado obviously paid huge dividends last night. Jalen Brunson has been a baller. Karl Anthony Towns, I still think, is one of the most, if not the most overrated player in basketball. And then you have some other guys and stuff like that. And they just picked up Jeremy Shohan today. So how do you feel about the Knicks as a whole?
I mean, I don't really, I feel like the Knicks they haven't improved much from last year, to be honest with you, and they went pretty far last year. They made the conference finals, but at the end of the day, I feel like it's kind of reminds me of like the Phillies a little bit, like running it back, running it back. Obviously, this is a bit of a different circumstance, but I just don't know that they found that piece yet, in my opinion. And maybe they proved me wrong. I love Brunson. I think he's a hooper. Villanova alum. Um, I would have to disagree with you on the Karl Anthony Towns standpoint. I think Karl Anthony Towns is a really really good player. I think he's one of the more versatile centers in the league, and on any given night he can go out there and score 40. I really really like Mikal Bridges. Think he's a great player. And then other than that, I mean the Jeremy Shohan signing it doesn't really hedge the needle for me at all, to be honest with you. And I don't know. I mean it's more depth. And then touching on the Jose Alvarado um acquisition, I just feel like he's not going out there and putting up 26 against anybody else on a daily basis. Like that game last night was just terrible. It was brutal. Um I think I turned it off at the end of the first quarter. And like I said, the Sixers are just very short on defense. And a guy like Jose Alvarado, he's sneaky. He's one of them guys that'll come up from behind you and get a steal. And I just feel like, with certain teams, there's different playing styles. And you go up against a team like Cleveland or even Boston, that's not going to slide. So I feel like you're still missing that piece.
No, yeah, I think I like you bring up the point about the Knicks being the Phillies. I think it's a perfect comparison because it's like the only difference they probably have is they actually had the willingness to change their head coach. So, but Mike Brown's a good head coach, but you're not going to change the issues of that what you already have. Brunson, he's bound to miss a few games. Why I say Karl Anthony Towns is overrated, I think he can give you good points on a night to night basis, but I think he's a very massive defensive liability anymore. I think he can't guard 1 to 5, and like sometimes I think it's his inconsistencies why I have him overrated, because they gave up a decent amount to get him, and yes, he's been good for spurts of a time, but I think the Pacers exposed him a lot in that playoff series last year, and I think another thing, he's just a guy that comes up small in the playoffs. Why do you think the Timberwolves were willing to trade him? He was their first overall pick, 2015. It was like that Anthony Edwards took over as the franchise guy, and he kind of just became second fiddle. And then it was to the point where Rudy Gobert sometimes offered more than Karl Anthony Towns did when in a playoff series. And I just think at the end of the day, with him and stuff like that, yes, he can be good at sometimes, but then also he's a huge liability on the defensive end. And then when you can figure him out offensively, he's not making a 3-point shot. He makes no impact in the paint, and he's the type of guy, he's asking for a foul. He's flopping here, flopping there, and it's like, what when you get to that point of the game with him, he is all out of sorts and is just asking for stuff and is not going to get it. And that's where teams are trying to get him, and more common than not, they are able to get it to. But I think in the Knicks sense, I think highest expectation for them is a second round. I think there's teams better than them that could knock them out in the second round of the playoffs and get to the conference finals. If they have to play the Pistons, I think the Pistons would easily be able to expose their weaknesses, and they took them to the limit last year with a much worse team, and much not as it's still a similar team with the Pistons, but this team's much improved, a lot more experience, and Cade Cunningham would be running circles on that team, I think. So, but before we touch on more of the bigger things, you mentioned the Sixers a little bit there. Since I did a Sixers video last week, I'll give you a little bit of opportunity to see how you're feeling about the Sixers, especially before I did that video. They had some 3 games coming up. They only won one of them, so now they finished at the All-Star break with a 30-24 record. How are you feeling about the Sixers at the All-Star break?
So for a while during this West road trip, I was very locked in. We started off great. We took down Golden State, took down a couple other teams, took down Phoenix, and I was like, okay, we may get off of this road trip one loss, maybe none. And then we come up against Portland, and that game was just, again, defensive liability. I mean, Portland couldn't miss that night. I mean, it was what it was. But I feel like there's nights where the Sixers can go out there and they can look like championship contenders, and then there's nights where I feel like they're not even mentally there, and I I don't know who to blame at this point. I want to blame coaching. I want to blame the inconsistency of Joel Embiid. Although he's having a great season when he is on the court this year, I just feel like it's weird because he'll go from not playing back to backs to I'm not going to play this game and actually might be out the next game too. So it's random. He'll play his spurt of games, and it's like, okay, I played 5 of the last 7 games. Now I need 3 games off. It's just I know, I guess it's injury management, but at this point it's just a liability. No matter how good he's playing. And then, like I said, when you know Drummond and Adembona have to run the floor, it's like we're not a team that can compete, especially with these top contenders, top dogs. Um, I just feel like Nick Nurse, at the end of the day, he his mind's got to be all over the place, and I got to feel for the guy, but at the same time, it's like you got to say, and you can talk, you can get a hold of the upper management like Daryl Morey, you can get a hold of guys in the front office. Us fans, we can't. So who knows what it's like behind the scenes, but I just feel like they're very questionable. Going into the trade deadline, I was feeling like, okay, we're going to be buyers. Surely we're not going to sell. And then what do? They go out there and they sell. Um, the Jared McCain trade, I'll touch on that. It's like, I really like the guy, I like his potential, but we're very heavy on guards, and it's crazy because now when I say that, it feels like I'm crazy because now you're looking at a night where Grimes gets sick and Kyle Lowry's on the floor for 10 plus minutes. And then you're like, wow, like we could use a guy like McCain right now, or, could use a guy like Grimes. But once one of them guys goes out, it's like, okay, now here comes Kyle Lowry on the floor. So a guy like McCain, I don't know if that was the right move exactly because he's on his rookie deal. He's got 2 years left on his rookie deal. He's not eating up a lot of money. I know it somehow got them under luxury tax, and a lot of fans will argue that that deal was to put him under the luxury tax. Now I'm not sure because Morey got out and publicly said that they made that trade early to try and use them picks into another deal, and nothing materialized, was his words. Um, I really don't buy into it anymore. The Sixers aren't a team that I look forward to watching, but at the end of the day, like, if they get going, obviously I keep up with them, but if they get going, I'm like, okay, I'll buy in. I'll watch the game tonight. But I feel like it's just I kind of know what to expect when I watch them. You know what I mean? But like I said, when they're clicking, they click, they look like a championship contender, and then when they don't, it's like it's tough. But one more thing I want to say is when they made the deal to deal McCain, I was a bit like, you know, optimistic because I felt like that could bring that could mean they're going to try and bring back Grimes. And when you have a guy like Grimes on this team, he's kind of the reason why McCain wasn't getting many minutes and getting opportunity to finally heal from his injury completely and get back to his playing style. And no matter what the guy's doing, coming back from an injury, he's got to get minutes. He's got to get back into his flow. And Quentin Grimes just wasn't allowing that for McCain on this team. He wasn't a fit at the current moment. But like I said, he didn't seem like he was unhappy. He was doing whatever they told him to do. Go down to the G League, play a couple games down there, and he wasn't really crying about anything. So I feel like, maybe if you just gave it to the end of the season, Lowry's probably going to retire. Maybe you don't get Grimes back. And then there you go. McCain slots right in, and he can potentially be a starter next season. But nah, they let him go for a first round pick in a couple seconds. And I was optimistic about it. And now my optimism isn't really high about it because I feel like that pick is going to be very late. It's Houston's pick. Houston's, they're a pretty good team this year. And yeah, I don't know how to feel about it. I feel like the Sixers are potentially first round exits, but like I said, if they can get clicking and Joel plays, they have a chance. So that's kind of how I feel.
Yeah, so I was obviously a little bit optimistic when I recorded last Friday, but about the team and the trade for Jared McCain. But after I saw Kyle Lowry playing and his stat line, by the way, he put up, I think this was his stat line. I think it was straight ones, and this was my reaction to it. Like, are we dead ass right now? Like, he's playing minutes. He looks like a grandpa out there. Like, he should not even be playing. And then I love the point you bring up at the very end. Grimes is not guaranteed to come back. And say he comes back from injury and starts shooting the lights out like he did last year. He's as good as gone because he wanted to get paid this offseason. No one just was going to give him the money because there
Correct.
wasn't nobody to pay him. There's going to be teams to pay him this offseason without a doubt. But the way teams are tanking, if they're able to build a good core, get a top pick, and then maybe bring a guy like Grimes in, like, for example, Washington or Utah, they're taking the approach where they're trying to build a core, maybe hopefully get a top 5 pick, and then get good guys to fill out their rotation and hopefully compete next year. Grimes could be one of those guys. And McCain, you talk about the starting lineup. I think, and McCain was finally coming into his own, I think, before he got traded. He was injured. They gave him a chance to play, and he was knocking down threes. And I think most of all, you saw the impact it had on the players. Everyone was heartbroken. I know when a player gets traded, it's tough because you guys are boys and everything. But I considered Edgecombe, Maxey, and McCain the happy guys. Like, they were always that happy-going attitude. They gave that positivity to the team. And it's so annoying, too. It's like McCain, he was good for you last year. Obviously, the injury is tough. And it's like, you got blessed with VJ Edgecombe, but at what cost at the end of the day? Like, you got to get rid of a guy, McCain, that me and you both loved when we drafted him last year. So, and it's tough. And I think McCain, best of luck with him. And okay, here's a perfect example, too. OKC's 2 best players down the stretch, I think it was either last night or the night before, Isaiah Joe and Jared McCain. Like, are we dead ass, bro? 2 former Sixers. One that we cut so we could sign Dwayne Dedman. Like, unbelievable. Like, it's bad at this point. Like, and then I, like you said, I want to be just as optimistic as you, but then getting destroyed by Portland, Tamari Kamara looked like Steph Curry out there against us, and then getting dismantled. And I want to say this about Joel Embiid. What stopped you from playing in yesterday's game? You have the All-Star break coming up. You're not having to travel to LA because you didn't get picked to go to the All-Star game. Play that game. And it was so influential. If you would have won that game, you would have won the season series against the Knicks because you beat them 2 times earlier in the season. You lost that close game that, oh my God, I wanted to punch my television with that game because they should have won that game. That game should have never been close. And then this game, you go out, you don't have anybody playing, and you're expecting Maxey and Edgecombe to do everything. These guys are gassed, and they're either going to have to go to LA, play in the All-Star game. You have to figure out a way to figure this. You have to figure out a way to get these guys minutes. And then Cam Thomas, who was right out there in free agency, you don't even give him a thought, I don't think. And then he drops 31 last night with the Milwaukee Bucks, leads them to a win. It's just McCain, like Morey can say this and that. Even Embiid, I'll give respect to Embiid. He said, I don't want this team to try to duck under the luxury tax. I want them to make winning moves. Other teams, although they might not be the greatest moves, they made winning moves. Alvarado, although you said might be not be jumping 26, at least the Knicks are giving the team optimism that they're trying to win by making these winning moves, and the Sixers don't care about that. Josh Harris, who mind you is in the Epstein file, so hopefully he gets out of here sooner than later. And then you have Daryl Morey, which I think ever since the Harden situation, he's just completely downhill. His free agents completely off the mark, and then his draft has not been good. Only when he's had the opportunity to draft good players. So, but I think it's remaining to be seen. I hope they play well down the second half of the season, but I think it begs the question again. I for one have stopped gaining trust in them. I'll watch them to enjoy them, and if they're playing well, I'm happy. But I'm not the type of person to have these outlandish expectations like I used to. So.
Yeah, I like I like how you touch on ownership. I feel like ownership has been the problem with this team. I feel like Josh Harris is a terrible owner. And you look at the teams he owns around the sports industry. He owns the Devils. They're horrible. They haven't done nothing in years. And then he owns the Commanders, who I know was a recent acquisition for him. You know, he just recently bought them, but they're another team. Yeah, you know, they made the NFC Championship last season, but this season, I get it, you know, injuries hurt them a bit, but it just feels like, you know, when his team's riding high, he'll promote, he'll do this, he'll do everything he can. And then when his team finally, you know, hits that stretch where it's just like, you know, we're not doing much, he kind of just gives up. He kind of, you know, kind of stops caring. And when you own that many, you know, sports organizations across the leagues, I feel like it's got to be a bit of a burden. Like, you got to focus on this team, that team, and then this team. And it just feels like it feels rough. I feel like we're getting the shitty end of the stick as Sixers fans because, in my opinion, I feel like Morey, you know, is completely in charge. I like to touch on this real quick because when you look at owners, and I'll point out John Middleton, the owner of the Phillies, he's involved in almost every move that we make. He'll go out and tell a guy like Dombrowski, or even when we had Clentech, he'll tell them, you go out and get this guy, and he'll go out and he'll have dinners and meetings with these players. As the owner of the team, that's not necessarily his responsibility, but he'll assure these players what they're going to get when they're coming to this city, and he'll assure these fans what his goals are and what his aspirations are for these upcoming seasons. And you got a guy like Josh Harris. He couldn't give a shit to give a lick to the fans. He doesn't care to address us with anything. And that's a problem that is with this organization. In my opinion, it starts with ownership. The Sixers ownership is horrible. It's been horrible, and I don't see it changing anytime soon because, like you said, they're greedy and it's all about money.
Yeah.
That's my opinion.
Yeah, like you said, it's all about the money for Josh Harris. That ching, ching, ching. If butts are in the seats, it don't matter what the record is. But moving on from the Sixers, I have some teams that I want to talk about, but in a specific topic, tanking. It's easily been one of the bigger things, especially after this trade deadline, and we had some breaking news just before that with two teams getting fined $500,000 each, respectively. The Jazz and the Jazz got fined $500K for sitting Jaren Jackson Jr., their new trade deadline acquisition, and Lauri Markkanen, and then the Pacers were fined $100,000 for violating the participation policy. Sorry, that's a lot of P's. But and they obviously just got Vitsa Zubats, and they have Siakam, who haven't played in these fourth quarters. So what's your opinion on all this tanking? Obviously, in my opinion, it makes sense why they're doing this because this is one of the most loaded draft class. But if I learned anything from these past few years, these teams that tank just get screwed at the end.
Yeah, I like how you touch on that. They get screwed at the end. Because you look last year, and this still, I don't want to touch on conspiracies here, but this is still the craziest thing that's happened to me. You know, out of the blue, I'll never forget where I was too when this trade happened. Luka Doncic trade to the Lakers. I was in the movie theater, and I picked my phone up, and I was like, did Shams get hacked? Like, is something up here? And it just felt so weird, like that trade. It feels like the LeBron's coming, his career's coming to an end, and then we got this great star in Luka Doncic. Let's just send him over there for a first round pick, Anthony Davis, and a couple more things, and then you get to the draft, and all of a sudden with like a 1% chance, just so happens that first round pick that gets sent over is the number one pick, and it turns out to be Cooper Flag. So like you said, tanking isn't always a guarantee. I feel like everyone's got their hand in the pot when it comes to, you know, the draft lottery and this and that. But it's hard to lay a finger on a team who's tanking. Obviously, when you bench your best players, you kind of just sit there and be like, okay, like something's up here. You're trying to lose. But I feel like, like I said, it's hard to lay your finger on a team who's tanking, but everyone makes their own assumptions. And on any given night, it's basketball. We can go out there, we can see the worst team beat the best team. But when you start to see, uncompetitive games with, like you said, I think you said the Jazz and somebody else. Who was the other team?
Pacers.
The Pacers, yeah. So when you go out there and see a team like the Jazz just get annihilated by another bad team at the bottom of their conference, and for good reason. They don't have a good reason. My fault for benching. Their best players. It's kind of just like, okay, we got to do something about this as league officials, and I don't like the idea of tanking, but that's kind of easy for me to say as a fan of the game. Like you want to see different teams compete. You want to see upsets. So at the end of the day, it's not something I support, to be honest with you.
Yeah, no, I don't support it either. And it's like you have these teams trying to tank, and then you have the Sacramento Kings who can't even win a game. They've lost 14 straight games, and they're throwing DeMar DeRozan, Zach LaVine, Russell Westbrook out there. Devonta Sabonis, who I'm surprised they didn't trade at the deadline. They're just throwing them out there trying to win, and they can't even win a dang game. But then the other argument I want to bring up to you, obviously this draft class is loaded. Some of the main headliners: Darren Peterson, AJ Demancic, Cameron Boozer, and then I can't think of the last guy. There's one other guy that's been really emerging off the scene. I can't remember him off the top of my head. But those guys in particular, what's the appeal if they get if say the Kings get the first overall pick? These players are not going to want to go there, and the NBA realizes that. So the marketability of these players are going to matter more than these teams having the opportunity. Because if we learned anything, the Kings had DeMarcus Cousins. He was never able to compete, was unhappy, and eventually got traded, I think, for pennies on the dollar. The NBA is going to realize, oh, I don't want AJ DeBan to go to the Kings. I don't want him to go to the Pelicans. I want him to go to a team that he's going to be able to market well and make money. Adam Silver's no idiot. He knows what he's doing. You can talk about the conspiracy theory with Patrick Ewing. I think Cooper Flag is another example. I completely believe that 100%. I think there's no way possible that isn't actually. It's no way there's a coincidence. That 100% happened for a reason, and now look at the result because of it. Although the Mavericks suck, they're staying relevant because of Cooper Flag. Another thing with these players and stuff like that, Darren Peterson has been emerging on the scene. Just because he might be the best overall prospect, does that mean he has to get punished if he goes to a team? But then on the flip side, you don't punish him, you let him to go to another team, and then they build this super team because of it. It's like there's gotta be a balance, and I just think the NBA won't be able to find that just because they don't. I think they've stuck themselves too much in a hole, and now don't know how to dig themselves out of it.
Yeah, I think exactly what you said is true. The Adam Silver, he realizes where he doesn't want these very talented prospects to just go to a team and you know have their careers die out, which is respectable. But at the end of the day, that's the name of the game. I feel like I feel like commission and higher ups in the league, they kind of should leave their hands out of the pot when it comes to draft lottery and things like that. I feel like, let fate decide everything and let these players go, you know, where their fate leads them. So I mean, at the end of the day, it's tough because when you get a draft lottery like we had last year, and that 1% chance or whatever the percentage was for them to get the pick, when it happens, maybe do you feel like that causes teams to just be like, okay, well, if they have their hands in the pot and they're gonna just be giving out picks, I'm gonna assure myself to get into the lottery. So that way we can be guaranteed one of these 4 stars or one of these 5 stars who are coming out. Do you feel like that maybe intrigues these teams to just be like, okay, let's tank, let's lose this game, and let's lose as much as we can. That way we can be assured if we're not going to get the number 1 pick, we're going to be able to mark ourselves inside the top 5.
An example of your point is, I think it's a yes, it makes sense, but also at the same time, if I'm this team, I'm trying to win because the last 2 number 1 picks were play-in teams. They were in the play-in tournament. The Atlanta Hawks and the Dallas Mavericks were both, although they didn't make it far in the play-in or even in the playoffs. If this gets to the extent that maybe if they were an 8 seed or 7 seed and somehow get into the lottery, that is where the point where it's like you got to shut this down. And I think when I was on the radio, someone presented this good idea. I think what they should do is the 2 worst teams have to play an exposition game. The winner gets the number 1 pick. That is the most hustle I think we'll see out of a team since the 90s. That game won't even think I get to 100. I think that game will be pure cinema. These teams would actually be willing to play their star players. Like, for example, say it's the Wizards and the Utah Jazz. Anthony Davis, Trae Young, Jaren Jackson would all be coming back to play in this game, and it would be the most competitive game you've seen in a while. Because if you give teams incentives, I think that's where it's going to work. But the NBA is not that smart. They'll do that in 20, 25 years when this issue has been dead about and we don't even care about it anymore. That's when they'll do it because the NBA is so behind the world and what they want to do with things. So, but I think at the end of the day, it's tough for these teams because obviously the Wizards, I like what they're doing. I think they brought in Anthony Davis and Trae Young. They're not playing them this year, but they can play them next year, implement them into the starting lineup, start fresh, and then maybe have a top pick. That strategy I like. But with what Utah's doing, Jaren Jackson was there. And here's the thing about this that's they're winning. They are up in these games, and then they take them out in the fourth quarter just to proceed to lose. It's not going to matter. And if you learned anything, winning a few extra games might benefit you more than it doesn't. It really does. It really makes the most sense because the top 3 teams last year weren't even the top 3 worst teams in the NBA last year. It was the Dallas Mavericks, then it was the San Antonio Spurs, and then it was the Philadelphia 76ers. Except for the Dallas Mavericks, the Hornets and Sixers sucked. But other than that, it was to the point where it's like you see these teams and stuff like that, they're tanking, but then here's the last example I want to bring up. The Detroit Pistons tried it for years. They were only able to do it when they got Kate Cunningham. Other than that, I think the last thing I want to leave about it at this point, you have to be you have to be an marketable team. Like perfect example this year. Milwaukee Bucks, Giannis Antetokounmpo. He's bound to get traded this offseason. He gets traded to a team that markets him. Don't be surprised if Milwaukee ends up with a top 3 pick so they can start building them up as a new star. So, or even a team like Indiana, they're probably going to get a top pick this draft to help build Tyrese Halliburton up. At this point, the NBA draft lottery, you no longer have to look at the bad teams. You have to look at the teams that the NBA can market because that's where these star players or these top prospects are going to end up going, I think.
I mean, if it happens this year, if we see, like a playing team get the number 1 pick, or if we see, a team with less than a 10% chance heading into the lottery get the pick, I feel like that's when we can officially say, like, okay, this is what the NBA is doing. Like you said, they're going for marketing. And to be honest, when Tyrese Halliburton comes back healthy, I wouldn't mind seeing a guy like AJ DeBance to, pair it out with him. Like that would be awesome as a viewer. And I would be very happy if he goes there because he can keep his career alive right off the bat. He can, draw in fans, and like you said, it'd be great for marketing. So if we see that happen this year with the draft lottery, then I think we can officially say, like, okay, this is what's going on, and it's all about marketing at this point. But one more thing, I feel like we've kind of seen that too. Like we knew that there was some stuff going on when you get these gambling scandals coming up, and not only in the NBA, but they were leaked within college too. So you kind of know, like, these players kind of know what's going on, and now it's time for the commissioners and the higher ups in the league, higher league officials to have a response with that. So that may be okay. Well, if we can't, you know, stop these guys from going out and not giving it their all every night because they got a little money here and a little money there, then we're gonna do our best that we can to make the most money for ourselves and for this league to keep it alive and to potentially keep the fans there.
Yeah, no, I agree in the sense, and it's like, I think I'm gonna get this to extent too. I think it comes down to the trades that are also made too. I think the Minnesota Timberwolves easily wanted Giannis Antetokounmpo at the trade deadline. I don't think they had the package to, but there also could be NBA, like, because the NBA could have easily stepped in this situation and got a Giannis trade facilitated and got him moved. But I think the NBA wants to wait till the offseason. There's a bigger appeal. Oh, free agency, bang, out of nowhere. There's a Giannis Antetokounmpo trade, and he's on a new team just like that. And also, I think it benefits the teams more because they're able to have a better use of their assets. But it won't be surprised if Giannis gets traded to a team and it's like, at this point, I wouldn't be even surprised if he got traded to the Lakers. At this point, it wouldn't be surprising whatsoever. LeBron leaves in free agency, or he just retires. They get Giannis and they have Luka Doncic. Look at that market right there. Or I saw another point. Giannis to the Cavs for Evan Mobley and a bunch of first round picks. That wouldn't surprise me either. So, but I think at the end of the day, the NBA is something that it's all about marketability. Adam Silver knows exactly what he's doing, and it's started with the thing that's pictured behind us, the All Star game. That's been completely ruined from what it used to be. So, but before we wrap things up, is there any other thing in particular that you want to talk about that really stood out to you in the first half of the season?
Not necessarily. I want to talk. One thing that shocked me was Dame Lillard inserting himself into the 3-point contest. That was pretty shocking because obviously he's not playing all season, and he's gonna go out there and he's gonna play in the 3-point contest. I mean, that'll be interesting to see because if he can go out there and he can run from rack to rack and shoot these threes, within the time limit, that would be pretty impressive. But that's another thing. Like if you're the Milwaukee Bucks, like are you happy with that? Like they have to have a say in what's going on there. Like if I'm the Milwaukee Bucks, I'm telling them, dude, there's no reason for this. Like
He's on Portland
just
now, actually.
oh, he's on Portland. All
Yeah,
right, my fault. So if I'm even better, if I'm in Portland, we're terrible. I'm straight up saying like, yo, dude, like you ain't playing. You ain't shooting threes. You're healing up, and that's that.
yeah, because they obviously brought him back for a reason. I think they want him to probably finish his career there. So, no, I think you bring up the 3-point contest and dunk contest. That's the only reason I'm watching the All Star weekend because the All Star game itself is a joke. Like, I think the only All Star game that I'm happy about right now is the MLB, and obviously I'm excited for what's to come this summer here. And then obviously the NHL has been spectacular now that they're in the Olympics, but also the Four Nations was absolute cinema last year. So, but
Yeah.
I think the All Star game, 3-point contest, and dunk contest, I'm excited for. But just looking forward to the second half of the season. More competitive basketball, obviously, is a must. But what teams can emerge out of these conferences and solidify themselves as legit playoff contenders, I think will be interesting to see. But this will wrap things up for this NBA first half recap. I appreciate Kenny coming on. It's always a good talk when he comes on, and we'll probably be on together again with the Phillies and MLB as the season comes around here sooner or later. But for the future things, we'll see how things go, and then I'll be talking with Joe and stuff like that. But maybe expect a video next week and stuff like that. It's mostly working around our schedules and stuff like that. But we'll talk to you when we talk to you. Enjoy the rest of your night and enjoy All Star weekend if you can at this point. Peace, guys.